For a few awful minutes, Major Evelyn Grant was treated like a threat, not a hero. Officer Brian Delaney saw a black woman in uniform and made a decision that would shatter trust, dignity, and one woman's sense of safety. He assumed she was the suspect. He assumed wrong. Major Grant, a decorated Army veteran with decades of honorable service, had come to the town fair with her family, not for attention, just for peace. But when they picked Evelyn Grant, they didn't know who they were messing with. They didn't know she would uncover a broken system, or that one officer's shame would ignite a reckoning far greater than anyone expected. What came next wasn't just justice. It was exposure, reform, and a voice too strong to silence. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you're watching from and make sure to subscribe, because the story you're about to hear isn't just about one woman. It's about all of us. Sunlight danced through the branches of Willow Creek's elm trees as laughter echoed over the fairgrounds. But beneath that bright sky, something dark was about to unfold. Something that would change the town and the country forever. It was the kind of morning that made people believe the world was still good. The sun poured gently over Willow Creek's annual summer fair, warming the cobblestone streets and lighting up the booths like tiny stages of color and joy. Children's laughter danced through the air like music, mingling with the scent of kettle corn, grilled peaches, and old-time fiddle tunes. Everything felt familiar, almost sacred. Among the crowd was a woman whose presence didn't demand attention, but drew it anyway. Not because she was loud, but because grace speaks softly. Her name was Major Evelyn Grant, a retired U.S. Army officer, known not just for her rank, but for her unshakable calm. Dressed in a pressed navy full uniform she hadn't worn in years, she strolled the fair with her sister and niece, pausing now and then to admire hand-sewn quilts, speak kindly to vendors, and pick up small trinkets for her goddaughter's birthday. Evelyn didn't come to be noticed. She came to remember what peace felt like. Near the edge of the artisan row, a young boy tugged at her sleeve, holding up a bracelet made of leather and beads. "I made it," he said, barely above a whisper. She knelt slowly, letting her knees creak without apology, and took the bracelet as if it were a medal of honor. "It's beautiful," she said with a softness that made the boy's eyes widen with pride. Then his mother asked for a photo. Evelyn nodded. She knelt again, this time beside the boy, smiling, not for the camera, but for the moment. And that was it, just a moment. A moment that should have passed into memory, like so many others at a fair. But life, as we all know, has a way of turning without warning. Have you ever had a peaceful day suddenly shift into something unrecognizable? Sometimes it's not the noise that shakes us. It's the silence before the storm. It began with a sound that didn't belong. A sudden, thunderous crack echoed through the fairgrounds. Not the pop of a balloon or the clatter of dropped plates. This was sharp, violent. Then came the screams. Confusion spilled like ink. Children cried. Vendors ducked behind their booths. Evelyn instinctively moved in front of her niece, shielding the child with her body. Far down the lane, smoke curled above a shattered jewelry store window. Within seconds, a figure bolted from the scene. Tall, fast, dressed in navy blue, a glint of metal, a pistol maybe, caught the sunlight as the man vanished into the stampeding crowd. People shouted, panic followed, and amidst it all, Evelyn stood, calm, centered, visible. From across the plaza, Officer Brian Delaney spotted her. His training told him to trust his instincts. His instincts told him the suspect was black, in a military-style uniform, and nearby. He reached for his radio. She matches the description. Black female, blue uniform, standing near the vendor stalls, requesting backup. Possible suspect. No questions, no confirmation, just assumption. Evelyn turned at the sound of hurried footsteps. Delaney, flanked by two other officers, was already moving in with a hand near his holster. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from the crowd," he ordered. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. I beg your pardon. You match the description of an armed suspect. Keep your hands where I can see them. The weight of those words hit harder than any weapon. She raised her hands slowly, dignity unwavering, voice low and firm. I'm Major Evelyn Grant, retired Army. I've committed no crime. But the crowd wasn't listening anymore. Nor were the officers. A police dog barked wildly from a cruiser. Delaney didn't hesitate. Deploy the K-9. The dog lunged. What do you feel when justice turns its eyes blindly toward the wrong person? Sometimes it's not the violence that wounds us most. It's the disbelief that anyone could mistake service for threat. And yet they did. The cold metal cuffs bit into Evelyn's wrists as she sat in the gray-washed interrogation room. Her back remained straight, her eyes unwavering. Across from her, Officer Delaney fidgeted, a crack already forming in his earlier certainty. He didn't look her in the eye now. Just tell us where you were before the robbery, his supervisor barked, trying to sound in control. I already have, Evelyn replied, her voice even. I was with my family, at the fair. There are photos, witnesses. Check the cameras. But they weren't listening. Not yet. That's when the door opened. In walked Marla Quinn, a sharp-eyed attorney with a voice that didn't ask for silence. It commanded it. I've got the footage, she said, placing a folder on the table. Her fingers didn't tremble. Time-stamped video from the fairgrounds. Major Grant was at the bracelet booth 15 minutes before the robbery. Surrounded by civilians. On camera. The real suspect fled the jewelry store in a dark SUV before she even arrived. The room went still. Delaney leaned forward, eyes scanning the images. The truth was right there, undeniable and silent. Have you ever watched someone realize, in real time, that they were wrong? It's not loud, it's quiet. It's the breath that catches in a person's throat. Delaney's jaw clenched. His commander's voice cracked under the weight of crumbling accusations. She matched the uniform. No, Marla snapped. She matched your prejudice. The words hit like a verdict. Evelyn didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her stillness was its own testimony. The damage had been done, but so had the reveal. Sometimes truth doesn't arrive in fury. It arrives in fact. And when it does, even silence has a sound. Night had fallen over Willow Creek, but Officer Delaney couldn't sleep. He sat alone in the evidence room, the dim glow of a laptop screen reflecting in his eyes. He replayed the footage again. Evelyn shaking hands with a vendor, laughing with her niece, posing for a photo with a little boy. Every frame proved her innocence, and every frame proved his guilt. Not of a crime, but of complicity. His mind echoed with the words of his commanding officer earlier that day. We can't let this blow up. The public needs closure. She'll have to be the face of it. It was the first time Delaney had ever questioned an order, but now he couldn't stop. The next evening, under the dim lights of a diner on the edge of town, he met with Thomas Ray, a former officer turned whistleblower. Together, they reviewed not just Evelyn's arrest, but dozens of past cases buried under paperwork and silence. Misconduct, false reports, tampered evidence. At the center of it all, Captain Morrow, a man praised in public and feared in private. Delaney saw the pattern, and he couldn't look away. What would you do if the truth put you at odds with everything you once trusted? Sometimes the hardest betrayal isn't from others. It's from yourself. By the week's end, Delaney had compiled everything. Body cam files, memos, even personal notes. He reached out to a journalist. He spoke to Evelyn's attorney, and then he stepped in front of cameras on the courthouse steps. I got it wrong, he said, his voice steady but low. I followed orders instead of facts. I arrested a woman not because she was guilty, but because I didn't question my own assumptions. The press swarmed. The story ignited. And behind Delaney, Evelyn stood, not in uniform, but in quiet strength. Sometimes change begins not with a hero, but with someone who finally decides to stop pretending nothing's wrong. Months passed, the headlines changed. The fair returned to Willow Creek, quieter now, as if the town itself was still holding its breath. But one thing had undeniably shifted. Major Evelyn Grant was no longer a forgotten name. She had become something more. She didn't disappear when the spotlight dimmed, she built something instead. With the help of allies, Evelyn founded the Grant Initiative, a national organization dedicated to supporting victims of wrongful arrest and racial profiling. She traveled across the country, not with anger, but with purpose. In every city she listened, in every courtroom she stood. In every meeting with lawmakers, she carried not just her story, but the stories of hundreds who came before and after her. And people listened. Reforms that once seemed impossible began to take shape. New legislation passed. Oversight boards were created. Police departments began mandatory racial bias training, not as formality, but as foundation. And in a modest classroom not far from Willow Creek, a familiar voice spoke to a group of new cadets. Officer Brian Delaney, now stripped of his badge, taught police ethics, not with pride but with penance. He told them the truth. "I let fear think for me," he said, standing at the front of the room. "I let silence excuse me. Don't let my failure become your habit." Across the hall, a mural had been painted. Evelyn, holding hands with a child, standing tall in her uniform. Below her image, 5 simple words. "They tried to silence me. Have you ever seen strength born not from power, but from pain?" That's what Evelyn had become. A voice that rose, not to shout, but to steady. And in that quiet strength, the world began to change, one listener at a time. The story of Major Evelyn Grant reminds us of a powerful truth. Dignity can be challenged, but it cannot be destroyed. In a world that sometimes moves too fast to see clearly, assumptions can do deep harm. Yet, even in the face of injustice, one person's quiet strength can light a path for many. What happened to Evelyn was wrong, no doubt. But how she responded, with grace instead of rage, truth instead of bitterness, speaks to something timeless. Many of us have lived long enough to know that pain is part of the journey. What matters most is what we do with it. Evelyn didn't seek revenge. She chose to build something better. Perhaps you've had a moment in life when you were misunderstood or wrongly judged. Maybe you stayed silent, or maybe you stood up with calm resolve. Either way, stories like Evelyn's show us that it's never too late to be a voice for fairness, to offer help where there's hurt, or to gently remind the world we all deserve to be seen for who we truly are. And sometimes the quietest strength is the one that changes everything.